But in this first hour, let's talk politics and more with author, podcaster, and Fordham University political science professor, Christina Greer. My first guest of the new year is Christina Greer. How's that for a rhyme, Christina?
I'm so honored to be the first guest of the new year.
I'm honored to have you on as our first guest of the new year. And where else can we start? We'll get to, again, more Venezuela stuff in hour two. But since Christina teaches this stuff at Fordham every day, I dare not start this conversation without giving her a chance to sound off on what she makes of all this drama regarding Trump, Venezuela, this territorial adventurism, what I regard as a blatant and illegal act of war. Indeed, Zohran Mamdani, the new mayor in the city where Christina lives, who she endorsed, has called this an act of war as well. We'll get to Zohran Mamdani and his inauguration speech and how he intends to govern in New York. We're all watching that. But first, here is your president, Donald Trump, talking about how he's going to run Venezuela.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious because that's what we're all about. We want peace, liberty, and justice for the great people of Venezuela. And that includes many from Venezuela that are now living in the United States and want to go back to their country. It's their homeland. We can't take a chance that somebody else takes over Venezuela that doesn't have the good of the Venezuelan people in mind. We've had decades of that. We're not going to let that happen. We're there now. And what people don't understand, but they understand as I say this, we're there now, but we're going to stay until such time as the proper transition can take place. So we're going to stay until such time as we're going to run it, essentially, until such time as a proper transition can take place.
Okay, Mr. President, that's your president. Here's your defense secretary, Pete Hegseth.
Nicolas Maduro had his chance, just like Iran had their chance, until they didn't and until he didn't. He effed around, and he found out. President Trump is deadly serious about stopping the flow of gangs and violence to our country. Deadly serious about stopping the flow of drugs and poison to our people. Deadly serious about getting back the oil that was stolen from us. And deadly serious about reestablishing American deterrence and dominance in the Western Hemisphere. This is about the safety, security, freedom, and prosperity of the American people. This is America first. This is peace through strength. And the United States War Department is proud to help deliver it. Welcome to 2026, and under President Trump, America is back.
Yeah, there's your welcome to 2026. FAFO, that's what he said. He after around found out. There's your defense secretary, Pete Hegseth. I got so much to say. I'll hold it till we come forward. It's going to be a great first hour with Christina Greer on Tavis, Smiley.
Made fresh daily in the Mert Park,
Los Angeles, California.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley, Christina Greer out of Fordham University, my first guest of the year. Delighted to have her on in first position. So, Christina, just weeks ago, we were told this is all about drugs. This is about Venezuela and their drug problem and shipping drugs to the American people. Drugs was the word a few weeks ago. And now we know, which we knew anyway, it ain't about drugs. It's about oil. I digress. It's all yours. Take it and run.
Well, Tavis, on the first day of class, I teach introduction to politics every semester. And I always tell my students, if you ever get confused on an exam, the answer is money. And just start there and work your way back. Don't get nervous, but it's like if we're talking about anything in American politics, the answer is money, and then you work your way back.
Work your way back,
and here we are. The Daily Show did a splice up of us talking about Iraq. It's a few weeks ago, and essentially splicing everything that was said about Iraq. They were using the same terminology to talk about Venezuela initially. And we know it's about oil. I mean, anyone who has two eyes and half of a brain figured that out months ago. And so initially, when they said it was about drugs, well, that falls apart when you pardon, the former president of Honduras,
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
right.
drugs, right? Then you say it's about gangs. Well, that falls apart when, you pardon this person and you invite them to the White House, and talk about building more prisons in El Salvador. And this president has ties to gangs, etc. So it's not about drugs. It's not about gangs. It's not about public safety. It's not about the diaspora. And so now it's just, because the president is so erratic and, can't sort of keep a coherent thought in his head, he always says the quiet part loud. And so now the Republicans are scrambling to justify what is so blatantly a smash and grab, which is, let me just go into our neighbor's backyard and kidnap a sitting leader in the middle of the night. And so we know that there's no regard for UN treaties. We know that there's no regard for international law. We know that there's no regard for the Venezuelan people. Many people have not really talked about the casualties of citizens, not just military personnel, but citizens who were killed in that extraction. So the list goes on, and we're dealing with a rogue president. And until the Republican Party and the sycophants within the Republican Party who are aiding and abetting this illegal international behavior, I don't know what the next steps are. Because, Tavis, if we can look at the Republicans in this administration and they don't even have a plan for health care for millions of Americans who are about to have premiums that are sky high, and or no premium because they're just going to have to go without insurance. And they've had 10 years to figure something out since they've been railing about Obamacare. And they haven't figured that out. We now know that we've gotten ourselves realistically into a 30-year intervention that I don't know how we're going to extract ourselves out of it.
Yep. So first of all, to your point about health care, I'm one of those Americans who got my bill the other day, and it has skyrocketed. So I'm not telling you something that I heard or something that we've been talking about that it seems foreign to me. My health insurance the other day skyrocketed, and my eyes popped out of my head when I saw that new bill come across my desk. And so I'm not the only person. Obviously, many of you listening right now are in the same boat that all of us are in. Maybe boat is the wrong word given this conversation about Venezuela, but we're all in the same situation because I just saw my premiums the other day and I am not happy about it. And again, so I feel your pain as a former president once said. But back to Donald Trump for a second here. We had this conversation, Christina, you and I had it. I had it with so many of my other contributors last year, 2025, about where the line was or is where Donald Trump will have gone too far. You have to believe that for any American president in this so-called democracy, there is a line somewhere out there. There's a line that he will step across where he will have gone too far. We asked that question time and time again in his very first year, and that's the part we got to remind ourselves of. This is the first year of a 4-year presidency. Now, I'm watching Donald Trump's face. I'm listening to his voice. I'm watching his eyes. Donald Trump is not well, and I don't even mean mentally well. Physically, he's at that age now, just about 80, and I can see signs. If you're watching him, you can see and hear signs that he is not fit. We know he's not fit. I'm saying a bit more than not being fit. He's not well. So whether or not he lives long enough to serve out this entire term, we shall see. That's God's domain, not mine. What I do know is that we're only 1 year into a 4-year term. It's only been a year, Christina. And we've asked this question. Not in the full year yet, exactly. It ain't January 20th yet, exactly. So we've not reached the 1-year anniversary of the inauguration, but we've been asking this question for the last year. Where is that line? So we start out 2026. You heard Pete Hegseth say with that Cheshire grin on his face, welcome to 2026. This is the new America. So here we now see him going into a country, as you just laid out eloquently, under the cover of darkness and kidnapping the leader, the sitting president of another country. And I asked this question again at the start of 26. Where is that line?
Well, Tavis, there clearly is no line, right? Because if we are dealing with a man with no shame, and he has surrounded himself with men now who have no shame. And the first term, he had a bit of an issue because there were individuals in his inner orbit who actually did have a line.
Eventually they did.
Eventually,
Exactly.
slowly but surely. But
Exactly.
even Bill Barr, even Jeff Sessions said this is a bridge too far. Even Mike Pence, a bridge too far. It
That's
had to
right.
be on January 6th, but here we are.
That's right.
I think, I talked to my dear friend and colleague who's also a guest on your show sometimes, Dr. Niambi Carter.
Sure.
And we always wonder, what is the line, right? Because clearly these supporters of the president, whether they're in the administration or in the Republican Party, don't have a line. There is almost nothing he can do. And we keep winding back the clock, Tavis, because we have to go back to not just the president's first term, but before he got elected, when he was caught on a hot mic talking about women and how he could grab them wherever. And they let you do it when you're famous, and ha ha ha. And Billy Bush lost his job, and that in the past would have been an offense that would have gotten him thrown off the ticket and banished into no man's land in any political party, right? We could think about Gary Hart being next to a boat called the Monkey Business, right? We can think about Howard Dean and the Dean Screen.
Sure.
I mean, things that have ruined people's presidential hopes. And this man said some of the most vulgar, quote unquote, locker room talk, which many athletes came out and said, we don't talk like that in a locker room. And not only did it not ruin his chances for the presidency, some people thought that that made him more of a man, right? And that just made him stronger than Hillary. And women were being too sensitive and uppity and all the things that he has just kept digging and digging into the most base desires of this manosphere that is filled with misogyny and hatred towards women, which then translates into hatred towards others. We've seen it with immigrants and obviously Black folks and Latinos and all other types of people. It's all in the same melange that this president supports and uplifts and allows people to go into their deepest, darkest, hate-filled desires and say it's okay, because that's what it really means to be a real American, which is also a proxy for whiteness.
That's deep. Put a pin in that. I may get back to that last point. Speaking of whiteness, so Donald Trump, which is his way, has a way with words. Whatever you think of him, he does in fact have a way with words. And again, because you teach this stuff at Fordham University, we all know from our history classes, you'll recall, at least from your history classes all those years ago, the Monroe Doctrine. What Donald Trump is doing now is the Monroe Doctrine on steroids. And he has now referred to it as the Donroe Doctrine. That's his terminology. It ain't the Monroe Doctrine, it's the Donroe Doctrine. So he's openly bragging about this new Donroe Doctrine, which again has at its epicenter this, as I said earlier, this notion of territorial adventurism, and it's Venezuela today. He's now threatening Colombia with the same thing. He has said that Cuba ain't worth invading because they're about to go under anyway. But he's doing this openly. He's bragging about it, and again, calling it not the Monroe Doctrine, but the Donroe Doctrine. So I ask now, what does this kind of adventurism mean for the U.S. writ large? We've been talking about Donald Trump and about Hegseth, but the defense secretary. But now I'm talking about the rest of us. What does this kind of nonsense mean for we the people, for the republic, when we are regarded or not regarded around the globe for this kind of behavior? Which again, you teach this. This ain't the first time we've done this. Now this is in the DNA of America. Let's just call it what it is.
From day one.
But from day one, exactly. But we're on a whole nother level now. I'm sorry, Christina, take it away.
Well, I think it makes us a lot less safe. Period. Right? It makes us, especially to our international foes and people who were once allies who will soon be foes, sadly. When we think about international terrorism, it makes us less safe on American soil. It makes Americans less safe when they travel abroad, or for military personnel who are abroad, for embassy personnel and ambassadors. It makes everything less safe. But also, Tavis, we're still dealing from the fallout from the Reagan era. And you and I are old enough to remember the damage that he did, and we're still sifting through that. When we think about Noriega and Panama and Nicaragua. I mean, all of the sort of Latin American countries and Central American countries that we dabbled in and then just left after we propped up a dictator and then just got bored once we extracted their resources. So here we are again, doing this in a much more, I would argue, insidious and violent way, uh, somewhat due to technology, somewhat due to an erratic president, somewhat due to someone who has military personnel who, someone like Pete Hegseth, who's grossly incompetent. I mean, words can't even express just how incompetent it is. He is, and so many four-star generals who have resigned, right? Not just because of quote unquote DEI conversations, but because they don't want to be a part of war crimes. And then also, Tavis, when we think about not just the moral conversation that we're having to make us less safe, intervening with other people's countries, plural, because let's be clear, it's not going to stop at Venezuela, but also the amount of money, again, thinking about money, it's going to take to sort of balance. We're still dealing with Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan. We still have a footprint there. I think that we're just going to have a sicker nation, as we just talked about with healthcare. We're going to have a lot of people who aren't going to be able to afford it, so they're just going to forego it. So we're going to start using doctors and ERs to cure everything as opposed to preventative medicine. We have, a health secretary in Robert Kennedy Jr., who is just, dare I say, dumber than a bag of hair, who doesn't believe in vaccines. We have moved so forward with vaccines where people don't die of measles and polio and things that, our grandparents or great-grandparents suffered as children. But now those are back. And so we're going to have an unhealthy nation. We know that he's getting rid of the education department and defunding public education on the K through 12 and even the collegiate level and community college level, which Joe Biden was really great at building up, since so many students need kind of that bridge, that community college bridge before they go into a four-year university. So we're going to have a less educated populace, a less qualified populace for various jobs to compete not just at home and abroad. And the list goes on and on. And so it's it feels like almost a hatred of the American people. They talk deeply about their anti-immigrant stance, but many of their policies hurt their own base. Their own base needs healthcare. Their own base needs public education. Their own base needs clean air and fresh air. I mean, as they get rid of so many departments that have environmental protections. Yeah. And so I think that, they telegraph these things constantly by A, getting rid of the Department of Education, or at least trying to defund it to a shell of its former self. B, changing the Department of Defense to the Department of War. How can you say that you want peace when you have changed the name to the Department of War, when you have surrounded yourself with someone who's never seen combat, who thinks that this is a game, who doesn't understand not just the military personnel who have to go into these countries and stay and live there and risk their lives every day, but the military families who aren't getting the support and the funding that they need. The president constantly talks about things and just moves on, but you remember those checks that he was supposed to send every military family? Whatever happened to that? What about the checks that he was supposed to just send to American people? What happened to those? So we're dealing with the man who cognitively we know is not well. Yeah. But the sad thing is he's surrounded himself with people who are aiding and abetting this behavior. And I use that terminology deliberately.
I have another half hour with Christina Greer, but during this first half hour of our conversation, Nicolas Maduro and his wife have just now appeared in U.S. court to face these narco-terrorism charges that the Trump administration used to justify capturing the president of Venezuela and his wife, and then bringing them to New York. Maduro and his wife were in court just a moment ago for a brief but required legal proceeding that has now kicked off what is going to be, you can bet, a prolonged legal fight of whether he can in fact be put on trial here in the U.S. And you should know, no surprise here, that he and his wife pled not guilty just moments ago in a U.S. courtroom to these charges. So they came. They pled not guilty, and they left, and they did all of that while Christine and I were talking in the first 30 minutes. So much more to go with her when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Christina Greer, who is a political scientist, author, professor at Fordham University. Delighted to have her as our first guest of the year. And we are talking about the big story to kick off this year. And no, not the ball drop in New York City, not even the inauguration of Zohran Mamdani as the new mayor. We'll get to that in a second here. But the abduction of Nicolas Maduro and his wife, President and First Lady, formerly of Venezuela. They were just in court moments ago, in case you've just tuned in, to plead not guilty to these charges. Maduro said in court, "I was captured." Those are his words. "I was captured." He went on to say, "I am innocent. I am not guilty. I am a decent man. That's what he told the judge. I was captured. I am innocent. I am not guilty. I am a decent man. That's what the deposed leader of Venezuela, Maduro, said in his not guilty plea, along with his wife, against all 4 counts against him, which include drug terrorism conspiracy, cocaine, importation conspiracy, and possession of machine guns and destructive devices. Those are the actual charges that were leveled against him today by the U.S. government in this era of Donald Trump 2.0. And he, again, and his wife pled not guilty to all of those counts. I repeat once again, he said that I was captured. I am innocent. I am not guilty. I am a decent man. Speaking of Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic Socialist mayor now of New York City, inaugurated just a few days ago, he reached out to Donald Trump over the weekend to express his opposition to these Venezuelan attacks and the abduction of the president. Here now, Zohran Mamdani.
I called the president and spoke with him directly to register my opposition to this act and to make clear that it was an opposition based on being opposed to a pursuit of regime change, to the violation of federal and international law, and a desire to see that be consistent each and every day.
Here is Mamdani, just new into office, Christina, and he's putting himself in the epicenter of international politics. Your initial thoughts? And I want to play some sound from his inauguration speech in a moment. But again, he's the mayor of New York City, obviously a multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic metropolis. But he hasn't wasted any time in letting his voice be heard on international issues.
No, he can't. We know that the mayor of New York City in many ways is the second most powerful job in the United States, not just because of Wall Street and the financial epicenter that is here, but also, the number of international leaders who come through. We are home to the UN, but also Maduro is being held in a Brooklyn detention facility and is being, heard in a Manhattan federal court. So this affects New York City deeply, not just because of the resources that we will have to impart because Maduro and his wife are here, but the mayor has to answer some hard questions. During Mamdani's campaign, he called for the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu and some of his alleged war crimes against the Palestinian people and so many people in that region. So this is a much larger conversation that the leader of New York, who is a Democratic Socialist, who has been very clear about the moral compass of not just he as an individual, but we as a city and we as a nation should have. So voicing that to the president was something that he felt that he needed to do. And we know that they have a very new but very tenuous relationship. Obviously, Donald Trump responds to popular people. He even commented how attractive Mamdani was when he went to the Oval Office and had their visit in D.C. But talking about affordable housing and real estate, which is the wheelhouse of the president, is one thing, but obviously talking about ICE interventions and international possible human rights violations, we know that they do not see eye to eye at all.
To Christina's point, so Trump calls Zohran Mamdani attractive, and Nicki Minaj over the holidays called Donald Trump attractive. I know, I'm throwing up in my mouth right about now. We'll talk about Nicki Minaj and her nonsense in the third hour of this program. And speaking of Netanyahu, Christina set me up for all these program updates. Speaking of Netanyahu, Bibi Netanyahu, has gone on record publicly saying he supports Donald Trump and what he did in abducting Nicolas Maduro. No surprise there, but they're in this club together, Trump, Netanyahu, and others. And so Netanyahu has publicly stated that he supports and agrees with the decision by Donald Trump to abduct Nicolas Maduro. So that's what Netanyahu thinks of what Donald Trump has done. Here is now Zohran Mamdani as he took the oath of office as mayor of New York City.
I was elected as a Democratic Socialist, and I will govern as a Democratic Socialist. I will not abandon my principles for fear of being deemed radical. As the great senator from Vermont once said, what's radical is a system which gives so much to so few and denies so many people the basic necessities of life. We will strive each day to ensure that no New Yorker is priced out of any one of those basic necessities. And throughout it all, we will, in the words of Jason Terrence Phillips, better known as Jadakiss or J to the moi, be outside. Because this is a government of New York, by New York, and for New York. Beginning today, we will govern expansively and audaciously. We may not always succeed, but never will we be accused of lacking the courage to try. To those who insist that the era of big government is over, hear me when I say this. No longer will City Hall hesitate to use its power to improve New Yorkers' lives.
I get a kick all the time, Christina. I see this every day, as do you, because you pay attention, as do I, as does this brilliant audience that we're talking to. But it never ceases to amaze me. I ain't hating on Zohran. It's just funny to me. The way in which black culture finds its way into everybody's mouth. You heard earlier on this program a clip of Pete Hegseth talking about FAFO. Maduro effed around and found out. So you got black culture in Pete Hegseth's mouth. Say that fast 3 times. And now you got Zohran shouting out Jadakiss. I mean, black culture is hegemonic. But anyway, your turn.
Yeah. Well, I think the black culture piece is a whole other podcast that we need to have.
Yes.
Or radio session. Just because a lot of people like to adapt.
Yeah.
But to the new mayor's credit,
yes.
he's a millennial and he was also a former rapper.
Yeah.
So this does make sense for him. With the current administration, presidential administration, I think it is disgusting how they're using Biggie Smalls to show pictures of them, doing invasions. And they, dibble and dabble in hip hop culture when it makes their videos look better, since obviously they're a media campaign and without much thought into next steps. I mean, you mentioned Nicki Minaj briefly. It is not surprising, she is not a citizen, that she is cozied up and embedded herself with such odious individuals. I mean, she also, does not mind being married to a convicted sex offender. Her brother is also a convicted sex offender. And so it's not shocking that she would cozy up to a convicted sex offender as well. So there's, if you look at her social media, I think this is a path that we knew that she was going to go on quite some time.
Yeah. Mamdani has made clear how he intends to govern. But again, you teach this every day, and you've been around for a while. I've been around for a while. And you start out with that kind of bravado, and then along the way you start to moderate. What's going to keep Mamdani where he is now, saying that I was elected as a Democratic Socialist, and that's how I intend to govern? That's what he's saying today. What will he be saying tomorrow?
Well, I mean, we know that he's going to have tension from the right and also possibly from the left, if he does not satisfy the hopes and dreams of the Democratic Socialists. But I think so many folks are wondering why he's leaning into the label of Democratic Socialism, because so many people like the idea of affordability. They like the idea of free and fast public transit. They like many of his proposals. So why not just say, these are Democratic proposals? But I think it's because so many people in the Democratic Party have been so silent on issues of affordability, issues of human rights, domestically and internationally. So this is a way to distinguish himself. Keep in mind the minority leader of the House and the minority leader of the Senate can barely say his name. Chuck Schumer still didn't endorse him, and Hakeem Jeffries did so just weeks before the election. So I think that this is a way to remind his supporters and to ask them to keep the pressure on him. It may be naive to do so. He's got a very short window to accomplish quite a bit before critics turn on him and start wondering, have we made a terrible mistake? But the good thing is he's coming in with tremendous goodwill. A few things. One, it looks like he wants to be mayor of New York City and isn't looking for another gig already, which many people felt Eric Adams was always doing, and definitely Bill de Blasio, who's running for the presidency while he was mayor.
Yep. I saw you. I'm sorry. Finish your part. Finish your part. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And it also looks like he wants to work for all New Yorkers, as his inauguration speech was very clear. It's not just a conversation about the tale of two cities in the de Blasio aspect. It's really a conversation that Eric Adams started when he was inaugurated, saying, I'm going to pay attention to the people in the outer boroughs who haven't been looked at or discussed in years, decades even. So if Mamdani can actually surround himself with good people, which it looks like he has thus far, and actually listen to them, which is something de Blasio did not do. And Adams surrounded himself with some very good people and some very questionable individuals, so
Yeah.
that made it much harder to trust the direction of some of his policies. But if Mamdani can listen to the good people that he surrounded himself with, some are new to these levels of power, and some are actually veterans of the Adams, de Blasio, Bloomberg, and even Giuliani administrations that can help shepherd in a new generation of leadership in the city. We're now a quarter into the 21st century, and we want to think big and bold about these ideas. And yes, they will have price tags, but as my grandma said, if we can put a man on the moon, we can figure this out.
Yeah.
So I think that he's leaning into that, especially since he's got such positive energy coming in so far.
Christina's written a pretty interesting and powerful, I think, provocative piece in the New York Times, unpacking a bit more about what she just laid into regarding Eric Adams and how he governed versus Mamdani, even some analysis about Bill de Blasio, the last quote-unquote progressive mayor of the city of New York. So it's a piece in the New York Times. Just look up her name, New York Times, and you can read the piece as I did in preparation for our conversation today. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by some of the insights that she shares in that piece. When we come forward, there is breaking news today about Tim Walz. You remember Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's running mate for a brief time, late last, not last year now, 2024, I guess. But there is Tim Walz news, which we'll talk about with Christina Greer when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Sometimes he fails at fitting in.
But we're okay with that.
You're inside the Tavis Smiley Show.
You are indeed with the Fordham University professor Christina Greer. There is news on Tim Walz. Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, announced some time ago he was running for a third term. Today, he has announced he is dropping his re-election bid. He, of course, was the 2024 Democratic vice presidential nominee alongside Kamala Harris. He has cited heightened attention on fraud allegations in Minnesota, adding, and I quote, "The political gamesmanship we're seeing from Republicans is only making that fight harder to win," close quote. Amy Klobuchar, senator from Minnesota, is suggesting that she might be interested in running for the seat. She and Walz apparently met yesterday to talk about his stepping down, her stepping up. We'll see what Klobuchar has to say in the days ahead. But to some people, this already stinks, Christina, which is to say that it smells again. Here's another example of Democrats running from a fight.
Well, I think, I've never run for office, Tavis, so I'm somewhat, I try and give elected officials a touch of grace.
Sure.
Tim Walz is now dealing with accusations that, baseless accusations, I should say, that, he somehow was behind his colleague being murdered. I mean, this is the stuff that Republicans are putting out on their various social media feeds. I think after a certain point in time, Tavis, a lot of these public servants just get exhausted. And we now know that, he's being blamed for this baseless claim that Somalis are defrauding the government, and these miscellaneous claims, again, thought up by the Republican Party that kind of come out of nowhere in their various anti-immigrant sentiments. So I think the larger question I would have is, it looks as though this insider politics, if I'm a Democrat from Minnesota, are we going to have really a robust primary if Tim Walz decides not to run? Or is Amy Klobuchar just the heir apparent?
Yeah.
That would be my larger question of, can we have a real election with ideas as opposed to essentially passing what would appear to be passing of the baton from one solidified elected official to the next?
No, it's a good question. And I believe in elections, not coronations. I know you and I are simpatico in that regard. An election, not a coronation. But again, to use your word, it's baseless. These claims about the fraud are baseless. The claims about his being behind these murders are baseless. And that's my point, that here you are having run, with Kamala for the highest two offices in the land, and now Republicans are acting crazy and throwing stuff at you that really ain't sticking, and you decided, I'm out of here. Now, he certainly has the agency to do that. He said he met with his family and decided this is the best option for him at this point in his life. I ain't mad about that either. But the optics on this are that Republicans are throwing stuff at you, and you decide to take your ball and go home. I digress on that for now. Our remaining moments with Christina Greer when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Freedom is an endless meeting. So let's get back to it with Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Christina Greer. I've got 3 minutes left here, and I want to yield the balance of my time to her for her final thoughts on the following. This is an interesting week of anniversaries. Today is January the 5th. So it's our first day back live this year. And I look forward to a year of bringing you some amazing conversations with great guests like Christina Greer throughout the year. But on the 7th of January, just 2 days from now, we will commemorate the 1-year anniversary of these fires here in Southern California that the entire world watched. We have specifically kept our focus at my home station in L.A., KBLA Talk 1580, on Altadena. We certainly pray for all those in the Palisades and beyond who lost homes a year ago this coming Wednesday. But we've been keeping our focus like a laser on Altadena. So Wednesday is the 1-year anniversary of those fires. It cost lives and property damage and all of that, and the drama. I just read the other day, over 70% of the people in Altadena are still not settled with their insurance companies a year later. Say nothing of rebuilding homes, not even settled with their insurance companies. That anniversary is on Wednesday. Our morning show here in L.A. will be broadcasting live from Altadena on Wednesday. That's the 7th, but tomorrow is the 6th. And you know what anniversary date that represents, Christina. I wonder in the last 2 minutes whether you can situate what it means for us to be in this mess. We started this hour talking about Venezuela and kidnapping a sitting president, and here we are tomorrow on the anniversary of January the 6th. Can you weave all that together for me in 2 minutes?
Yeah, well, I think that, it's a real reflection as to the failures of government. Obviously, January 6th is one of the lowest points in the 21st century for American democracy, and having a sitting president essentially try and stage a coup on American soil in our nation's capital, which is a majority black city. And then we can move over to Altadena on January 7th and the Palisades, but I'm specifically thinking about Altadena and the historically black community that was in many ways destroyed, and so many people are still trying to rebuild and also fight with insurance companies and also fight to make sure the deeds come back to their families, which they so deserved. And we know that so many African-American families are house wealthy.
That's right.
But now that they no longer have the house, where does all that investment go that so many of their grandparents worked really hard for? A reminder that Altadena is a community, a black community, because so many blacks weren't allowed to buy in the city limits of Los Angeles. So, we can think about all the racial conversations that we can have that we're still having several generations later. Every policy in this country is based on race and racism when we really get to the core of things. But, Tavis, I'm always optimistic.
Yeah.
There's so many small groups in Altadena and across California that are doing work to make sure these families get back in their homes. Communities obviously came together in ways that, just show the resilience. I know some black people are exhausted, constantly needing to be resilient and rebuilding. Right. But we always have that in our spirit to do that. We're a community-minded group of people by and large, and we always look out for one another. So that has been inspiring, and I think the reminder, I appreciate that you running that ad constantly to remind people that January 7th is a way for us to also reflect and contribute to the rebuilding of a really important black community.
I am blessed to have a strong stable of contributors, none better than Christina Greer, so I am honored to have had her as the first guest of this new year. Political scientist, best-selling author, professor at Fordham University, podcast host for that matter, and check out her piece in the New York Times. Just Google her name in the New York Times, it'll pop right up. Christina, thanks for kicking us off this new year, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, have a wonderful one. Happy